for that introduction, Art. As he indicated, I am a workforce development representative with the state of Minnesota. I've been working for the state for about 10 years, and I've been doing creative job search for about 8 of those years. So our topic today, we're pretty much going to concentrate, at least my part, we're going to talk about looking for work and using the internet to do so. I'd like to begin by talking about how this has changed over time. So when I was first looking for work and I first came down to the Twin Cities, the way I would look for work was I would go to the local convenience store, buy the Sunday Tribune, pull out the want ads, go to the jobs section, circle appropriate jobs, and then give them a call. But we have seen a lot of change in that process over the years, and today, of course, we have the internet. So let's start off by just go ahead and, if you like, type into the chat window a way of looking for a job. What are some ways that we can look for jobs? I'll just take a look and see what answers we get. Networking, yep, networking is definitely a big one. We'll be talking about networking. LinkedIn, we'll be talking about in the second half of the class. I will briefly touch on Glassdoor, see lots of references to Indeed, MinnesotaWorks.net. We'll talk about that today. There are, in fact, recruiters out there. Let's see, some of the things we didn't mention would be like friends, of course. We can go drive around the neighborhood, look for wanted ads and windows. There's a great deal of options for looking for work out there. Today we're going to focus on 2 of those, and those are pretty much going to be using the internet. Absolutely job board sites and family. We'll also talk about LinkedIn in the second half of the presentation. So, let's get started here. First thing we're going to talk about is this general category of advertised jobs. What do we mean by advertised jobs? In effect, we mean any job for which they are posted online or posted anywhere for that matter. As many of us are aware, many jobs are not posted, and the only way to learn about those jobs is to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And that's what we're referring to with networking, and we'll get to that in a bit. But for the moment, we're going to talk about advertised jobs. In other words, going online and looking for work. Any of you who have attempted this process will have learned that there are a great variety of job sites out there. And it can be a little overwhelming, especially if you are new to this and are just looking at this for the first time. We are not going to give a big list of job sites today, though I will mention a few. Most of you are probably aware of Indeed, which at the moment seems to be the largest of the commercial websites. But there are certainly a lot of other ones out there. So some general tips on using job boards in your job search. You'll notice that the second bullet here reads, look beyond the job title. So it's important to keep in mind that functions are not necessarily given the same title from one company to the next. And a job function here may be titled one thing, and another location it may be titled something else. So when we are looking for jobs and we want to look under our job title, one thing we might want to do is see what kind of alternative titles are out there, and we can use those to look for work. There's a website, onetonline.org, spelled exactly as it sounds, onetonline.org. And if you go there and you enter in your job title into the search window, it will pull up a list of alternative job titles by which that might be known. So that can be handy. So remember to look beyond the job title. Another technique that I found to be pretty handy for looking for work is if you have a particular skill that is closely associated with a job, sometimes we can search for the skill instead of searching for the job title. So for example, if we're familiar with something like Revit, odds are pretty good that any job that mentions Revit is going to be something that we have a chance of knowing something about. So we definitely want to be creative when we're trying to find jobs, and don't hesitate to use titles beyond those you normally do and look with skills and software programs or things like that. Any of those can help point you to jobs that you might not otherwise find. As I indicated, the number of jobs out there can be overwhelming, so we do want to try to focus as much as possible. The more we know what it is that we want to apply for, the easier it is for us to know what to look for, and that can definitely make a difference for people. Sometimes I have people come in and say, I will work any job, and that is very hard to give them advice on what to look for because anything is anything. It indicates here that we should use caution on the internet. What do we mean by that? There are some things that can cause problems for us when we're looking for jobs online. One thing that can happen is if you sign up for job notification sites, it can be easy to get buried in job notifications. So we want to be very careful about just handing out our email address and saying, yes, I'm interested in knowing about these jobs. A lot of times anyway, these are relatively low quality and people end up with email boxes that are effectively being spammed by dozens, if not hundreds of emails a day. So that's one thing that can be a problem. It can also be a problem getting our personal information out there when we put our resumes online. So we do want to be aware that there are some bad actors online, and we do want to use common sense and caution when looking at websites. It's also strongly suggested that after you do make what appears to be a good application to a job, that you do follow that up with a phone call to the employer. So there are specialty job boards out there. There's places like nurse.com or dice.com. Those are for healthcare jobs or for tech jobs, respectively. So there are those specialty job sites out there, and some of those are probably pretty good. In a little bit here, we're going to talk about MinnesotaWorks.net, the slide right here. MinnesotaWorks.net is one of the job sites that I do recommend to you. MinnesotaWorks.net is the official job board for the state of Minnesota. It is, to the best of our knowledge, the largest collection of Minnesota jobs. And as is pointed out on the slide here, if you go to things like Indeed and Simply Hire, there will be jobs in MinnesotaWorks.net that are not found there because those websites are not able to access them. One of the big advantages of using MinnesotaWorks.net is that the employers who are listing jobs here are all verified by the state of Minnesota. Before they are allowed to list the jobs, they must provide tax ID information to the state, and we do need to confirm that that tax ID information is legitimate before they are allowed to post to the account. So you can be pretty much guaranteed that any job found on MinnesotaWorks.net is going to be a legitimate job from a legitimate company in the state of Minnesota, or at least an employer in the state of Minnesota. The website also has a couple other features which are pretty nice, and one of these is that it does allow you to have multiple resumes online at the same time. Sometimes people are interested in pursuing more than one career at the same time, and in many of these cases, our advice is to make separate resumes for the separate jobs that you're interested in applying to. So Minnesota Works does accommodate that. It does allow you to have up to 5 resumes online. It also has a nice resume search feature. Once you have a resume uploaded into MinnesotaWorks.net, if you go into the search window, select your resume, the system will then proceed to look for jobs that seem to be a good match to the resume. So there are some good solid websites out there, MinnesotaWorks.net, state verified, all local jobs. Just to keep pushing MinnesotaWorks.net a little bit here, I would point out that 66% of employers who posted jobs to MinnesotaWorks.net ultimately did hire from MinnesotaWorks.net, and 85% of those who went to MinnesotaWorks.net to look for work did find jobs that were appropriate to apply for. So MinnesotaWorks.net, the official state job board, definitely one of our top recommendations for looking for work. So moving along here, we'll give you our #1 tip for looking for work online. You'll see that it reads here, avoid the job board addiction. It is easy to go online, apply for jobs, and come to the conclusion that that's all you need to do to look for work. But the experience of most of us is that most of us will need to do additional efforts to find jobs. As you can see on the slide there, about 75% of us ultimately find their next job through network. I can tell you that from my own personal experience, I have never had a job which I was not networked into. That does include this one. So while it is important to take advantage of the internet, and you do definitely want to be submitting applications online, you do want to balance your time between that, and you also want to make sure that you are not neglecting the networking side of your job search. Let's go back to that screen for one more thing here. I wanted to say one more thing about that previous slide here. And that is that I don't get this as much anymore because I think people are getting the message on this. When I was first working here, it was pretty common for people to come up to me and say, I put out 30 resumes this week. And what I found myself thinking when I heard that was that that means that you probably sent out the same resume 30 times in a row. And that means that there's a good chance that some of those resumes would have been overlooked because they were not tailored to the individual resumes. So, generally speaking, I think it is better to put out a few high-quality resumes to jobs that are carefully selected than to put out a large number of resumes to jobs that are not so carefully selected. For what it's worth, I will mention at this time that the career force is still open online and virtually, so we are happy to take a look at resumes if you have those resumes and are interested in having them looked at. So we can do those resume reviews by phone, we can do it by email. In some cases, we might even be able to do it by video conferencing. So just to make sure you know, the career forces are offering resume review to those of you who are interested in that. All right, I think it's okay now to move on to talk about networking here. I suspect most of us have the general idea about networking. Network essentially simply means all the people who we know and the people who those people know. Most of us ultimately do find our jobs in this way. A connection is better than no connection. It does not have to be a strong connection, and it does not have to be a direct connection, but any connection between two people is stronger than no connection. If you take a look at the slide here, you will see that we have a person who is looking for a job. They happen to have a cousin Mary. Their cousin Mary has a friend named Tom, and Tom has a former boss named Pam, and Pam has a friend named John. So the point here is that our main person here does not actually need to know Pam's friend John. They only need to know Mary. There are tools, digital tools that we'll talk about later on to help with networking, the big one being LinkedIn, of course, though there are others. So we will be talking about that in the second half of the presentation here. But for the moment, we just want to get across the idea that making sure that the people you know and care about know that you're looking for work, know something about what kind of work you're looking for and what kind of experience they have is one of the most important things we can do in our job search. As a side note here, I'd point out that it does not necessarily need to be somebody with whom you have a close personal connection again. Any connection at all will do. As long as Pam's friend John knows about the job, they do not have to have any further relationship with you. So, networking, a very important part of how we look for work. So who do we mean by a network? Who's in the network? We pretty much mean anybody who you know, your friends, family, and colleagues, acquaintances, business contacts, referrals, etc. Any of these people can be in your network. It could be your bowling club. It could be your knitting club. It could be people online. Anybody with whom you have any sort of contact could potentially be in your network. So there are job clubs out there. If you go online into Google, as it turns out, you can find a list of metro area job clubs. I think there's a lot of options out there for doing this. The big one, LinkedIn, we'll be talking about in a little bit, and I'll leave that to my co-presenters here to talk about. So beyond networking, we have the idea of actually reaching out to make contact with employers. Generally speaking, this is going to be done by phone in most cases, where we're going to reach out to the company, and ideally we're going to see if we can arrange an interview with a hiring manager. If we are able to arrange this, it will be important that we treat this as an informational interview and this is not as a hiring interview. If it's treated as an informational interview, I think you'll find that people will be pretty forthcoming, pretty willing to talk, ask questions like, you know, what's the state of the business? What direction are we moving? What kinds of things make for somebody to be successful in this line of work? I think all those lines of inquiry should get you some pretty good answers and be pretty helpful with the employers. If by some chance a job offer comes out of that, that is great, but that is not our primary purpose here. When we're doing an informational interview, we really just want to kind of get general information about the career. So last bit of advice there, stay positive, maintain a good attitude. People absolutely do pick up on that. So we'll want to be as upbeat and positive as possible if we are going to do this. So moving along here, we're going to talk a little bit about communicating by telephone. I've spent a lot of time on the phones, and I guess my first thing that I would say to you about the phone is to be aware that tone of voice comes through the phone. If you are happy, I can hear it in your voice. If you are sad, I can hear it in your voice. If you are anxious, I hear it in your voice. So we want to be aware that our voice can communicate a fair amount of our mood, and we want to be conscious of that. If you find yourself at home and you have a phone interview coming up, I have a couple general pieces of advice. The first one is dress up. It is true that they can't see you, but you can see you, and you will feel differently about yourself if you are dressed in your finest business attire than if you are slouching around the house in a bathrobe. So I strongly encourage you to dress up just as if you're going in for a live interview if you're going to do an interview on the phone. Another piece of advice I would give you is to stand up. If at all possible during the call, by standing up, it'll help fill out your lungs, get more air in there, your voice will be more resonant, you'll have more energy. Obviously, on the slide here, we see smile. The smile does indeed come through the voice. So I think having all these things in mind when you're talking on the phone, I think can be very helpful. I generally do recommend that you keep any paperwork that you might want to refer to during the course of an interview nearby. So it's a good idea to have your resume, certainly, and anything like that handy so that you can grab that as necessary. Lastly, I would point out that we want to make sure that there are no distractions in the house. So stereo, radio need to be turned off. Children and dogs need to be removed from the area where the interview will take place because you do not want them to distract you. So telephone communications is likely how most of us are going to be doing this. So I think keeping all these things in mind can help make that go better. Lastly here, we're going to talk a little bit about the social media. The big one, LinkedIn, we're going to wait for the second presenter here, but for the moment, we're just going to talk a little bit about Facebook, Twitter. The slide here indicates some studies show 80% of employers will try to find information outline about a candidate before an interview. I've seen a lot of wildly varying claims on that statistic, but I think the general idea that there's a good chance that employers might look you up is probably pretty accurate, and we should bear that in mind. So one bit of advice we do have for our potential job seekers is to Google yourself. If you've never done that, it might be a good idea to take a look and just see what's out there. We do have a couple websites that are more formally devoted to this purpose. Let me grab these up for you here. So if you want the official criminal background check for the state of Minnesota, let me see. I think I'll just type this into the chat. I think that will work while I read this out. And this is going to be www.bca.state.mn.us. So that is where you can go online to look up your actual criminal record here in the state of Minnesota. There are other places you can go online besides Google to look yourself up. I'm only going to mention a couple of these. One of them is a website called people.com. Also typing that in there, there's people.com. This is another website that aggregates information about consumers and makes that available to the public at large. I will mention one other one here, and this is spokeo.com, which is another version of the same thing, a website that aggregates information about people and then presents that to the general public. So these are all ways that we can look to see what kind of information out there is available about us. So generally, I think it's a good idea to be aware of that and to take a look and at least see. So I think that pretty much wraps up the main piece of my presentation here. At this point, I'm going to ask Art if there are any, or Robin rather, if there are any questions.
Yeah, I'll take that, Ben. There was a question that is very relevant, and we get a lot in these presentations, is how do you network due to COVID-19? You know, what has changed about the way we network when we're social distancing?
That is an excellent question. Obviously, I think a lot of that sort of contact is going to have to be done remotely these days. There's going to be phone and email. Of course, there are tools like LinkedIn, which you'll be talking about briefly here at some length. I'm not super familiar with these tools, but there are things like Zoom out there, which gives you a sort of easy video microphone platform to talk with other people. I'm not necessarily endorsing that, but I think tools like that can be pretty helpful for networking. And then, yeah, I think that's my initial thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I totally agree on that. One of the things you're all bravely doing today is you are getting onto a WebEx. I will get on a Zoom tomorrow. I will get on a Teams meeting the day after. All this is new to many of us, and if you could join some sort of networking group online, it will kind of give you two things. One, knowledge of how these platforms work, because your next interview is likely to be through one of these platforms, and also the ability to be introduced to a new group of people. Something as simple as an online book club is a networking opportunity. So look at new ways of networking above and beyond simply Facebook. I'm not a big Twitter user myself. I've had a couple blogs. There are ways other than what we've traditionally thought of as social networking, and many of those are groups that exist within your area or within your interest. All right, at this point, oh, we get a comment on here. Oh, by the way, all of the links that Ben sent, I will verify all the links and I will send them in the follow-up email so you don't have to worry about copying and pasting them to a Word document. I will send those all to you with the hyperlinks enabled.
I want to confirm that BCA link.
Yeah, I will do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate your time. We're going to move on. Yeah, you're welcome. We're going to move on to LinkedIn. At this point, Ben's going to turn off his video, and we're going to, I think my video is enabled here. Yeah, put it up there. So in the chat box, if you could, please give me a little feedback, and this is just a yes or no answer. First off, let's see, do you have a LinkedIn account? Just a yes or no answer. Oh, you guys are faster typers than I am. Okay, for those of you who have a LinkedIn account, to this point, have you found value? Do you know what to do with it? Somewhat? No? Yes? For the most part? Some value? Not really? Okay. So even for those of you who have found value, what I'm going to be talking about today are some simple steps everyone can take. Being aware that there is limitless potential for utilizing this platform in your job search and in doing business as a whole. There are videos that I will give you links to that do a deep dive into some aspects of LinkedIn. One of them is creating an account. The other one is some more advanced options. And what I'm going to go over today, I want everyone to consider, kind of take a step back and ask yourself, have I done all of these things? It's kind of a good refresher for those more advanced users, and for those people who haven't really engaged fully with LinkedIn, it'll give you some ideas of why we spend the effort. Because if you're putting effort and receiving no return, it's not worth your effort. And I'm hoping today to show you how that could pay off for you. So the first thing, how to build a strong profile. When you want to give yourself the best chance of success on LinkedIn, and this is actually in your entire job search as it exists online, it's really important to identify who you want people to see you as. So many of us, and I get this question a lot, have had different types of jobs. Maybe you have been in marketing for a good part of your career, but now you really want to go into something different. Maybe something as wildly different as now you want to be a on-air radio personality. There are certainly carryover skills in that, but you want to make it as simple for people to understand as possible. So you don't want to have what we call a split digital personality. You don't want your resume to say one thing and your LinkedIn profile to say another and your Facebook to say another, and that is something you do have to keep in mind. Facebook is a social media platform, much like LinkedIn. People don't view it the same way. I like to think of Facebook is just like LinkedIn, but a lot more fun. However, the key point is to make in this is we network with groups of people. The people we generally get jobs from are friends and family. We network with friends and family through Facebook. If you want to get a job through friends and family, consider what personality or identity you're putting out on Facebook. So if you choose to have discussions, have arguments online, you're potentially alienating one side or the other of an issue, and I'm not making judgments on either side of any issue. It's just that anything that's put on Facebook affects your network, your entire network, immediately. Most people don't do that sort of thing on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is viewed as a much more professional avenue. However, you do have to send a unified message. So if your resume says you are applying for a specific position, that does not mean you change your LinkedIn account each and every time you apply. That's not what I'm talking about. Think of it as, what industry am I promoting to myself, and in which case would LinkedIn be a good avenue for doing that? It means that you don't put everything on LinkedIn. One of the easiest things to change on your LinkedIn account, specific to what you're currently going for, would be your summary, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more in a little bit. Your networks are who you know, as Ben had said. In the chat box, please say, how many people do you think you know on a first name basis? Just give me a wild guess. How many people do you think you know on a first name basis? 100, 100, 200, 300. Boy, no one knows 327 people. It's all round numbers. That's good. 50, 500, 100. So there's a whole bunch of information, or a whole bunch of guesses out there. And by the way, there's no right answer. Some people know very few people, especially if you're new to an area. Some people know an enormous amount of people. Those that we know on a first name basis is generally about 300 people on average. That doesn't mean you couldn't know a lot more than that. Very few people know far less than that, because these are people that you're related to, that you've worked with, that you've gone to school with. The test I use is, if you call someone and say, hi, this is Art, they don't say Art who. That's kind of what I consider my first line network. So making sure you're connecting with your first line network, or your first degree a network, is really important. And that's how all of us start our network on LinkedIn. We're going to talk about how you get to that second level a little further on. And then LinkedIn is also about spreading information about what you have to offer. Your knowledge, what you know. The people that know us best generally know us personally. They don't know us professionally, and that's perfectly fine. I don't like talking about work outside of work. I love my job, truly, but when I get home, I'm off the clock. So I don't talk about my job to my friends and family. if I'm looking to my friends and family to help me find my next job, it's really important that they not just think of me as a good person, but someone who has a set of skills that are marketable to a given industry. So spreading that knowledge is really important, and LinkedIn is one of the most obvious and easy ways to do that. So first off, I'm going to bring up my LinkedIn account. By the way, we all use LinkedIn for different purposes. Your LinkedIn account doesn't have to have the same purpose, the same look as mine, but I'll just use it as an example. So the first thing we're going to talk about to personalize your account is personalizing your URL or the address people use to get to your account. This may seem like a silly, simple little thing to do, but unless you're doing it, you're losing out on making it easy for people to connect with you. So on a resume, I always list my LinkedIn account as a live hyperlink. There are some reasons not to do that. I choose to do it. And the reason I choose to do it is I think of my resume as a quick introduction. My LinkedIn account is a deeper dive into what I have to offer. So I think of a resume as maybe 17 seconds of someone's attention. If I can get them to my LinkedIn account, I consider that to be a captive audience, and they're there specifically to find out more information about me and what I have to offer. So to do that quickly and easily, all you have to do is go to your profile, and then on the top right, you click on Edit Public Profile and URL. Many of you, I'm sure, have already done this. The idea here is if you don't do it, and I've already done it on mine, it will be a long string of letters and numbers. Think about how that would look on your resume. Of course, no one's going to type either of those in. They're just going to click on one or the other, whatever happens to be there. It just looks neater, more organized, and takes up less space on your heading of your resume. So that's a quick hack. If you haven't done it, that's one thing you can do today. Another thing you should consider doing is personalizing your job settings. So I'll show you what that looks like. So again, I'm going to go back to my home page here, to my profile, and to show recruiters you're open to job opportunities. And let me just preface this for a minute here. LinkedIn is not just for job seekers. It's for anyone who wants to market themselves. Any business wants to market themselves. A realtor wants to market themselves. My cousin is he delivers concrete or cement. I always get that mixed up which one it is. He gets work this way. He is on LinkedIn. LinkedIn isn't simply for office workers. It's for anyone who wants to further their career or get more business. We don't sell on LinkedIn. We create value by giving away things for free. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into posts, but for right now, this is specifically towards someone actively seeking work. So to do that, you would click on this option right here, show recruiters you're open to job opportunities. Once you do that, you can list the types of jobs you're looking for. You can add a few. Notice I have operations manager here. You want to always choose from a list. You don't want to just type some things in. Sometimes it'll allow you to do that. Sometimes it won't. Always choose from a list. And by that I mean you start typing in and you choose what is most relevant. So in this case, maybe I want to be a operations manager, which is I already have there. Maybe I'll be a project manager. If I just type something in, like in schooling, it's going to quite often be misspelled and won't make a connection to other alumni. So if I said I went to U of M Winona, where the actual terminology was University of Minnesota Winona, my information will not carry over and be parsed effectively. The way you usually know that you don't have effectively parsed information on your LinkedIn account is it won't have an icon next to it. A verified name will have a logo. And for most of us, we have looked at logos all of our lives. Companies spend millions of dollars a year branding their companies. So when I say the golden arches, you think McDonald's. When I say a swoosh, you think Nike. That's what choosing a verified name does on your LinkedIn account, is it adds that logo, that immediate connection to that branding. There's a lot of things you can do on here. You can talk about the type of pay you want, how much you want an hour. And by the way, it's not what you would like to have, it's what you truly think you are worth. So if I were looking for a job that I thought, hey, based on my experience, I think I could earn $50,000 a year. You want to be realistic about this, because if you're putting $120,000 into a field that generally pays $50,000, employers might not take you seriously. And then you can talk about your benefits, your commute, your schedule. Be aware that the more filters you put on your job search, the smaller your opportunities become. I'm not saying you shouldn't filter your job search, but you don't want to put 20 filters on something. 1 or 2 usually will give you a good pool of information to consider. You don't want to be too broad, but you also don't want to be too narrow. And then if you add that to your profile, you will be able to get jobs coming in more readily to your inbox, to your email. But as Ben had mentioned, be very selective in the job boards and the platforms you do this with. You're going to find that signing up for one job board and making it wide open to all opportunities is going to spam your inbox to the extent that you might miss opportunities. So be highly selective. The cool thing about a lot of things on LinkedIn is you can unsubscribe pretty easily. So that's another option you have with LinkedIn. Talked about that. Another thing to do a deep dive into with LinkedIn is your privacy settings. This would be through your profile, through the Me icon here. And by the way, you might wonder, why doesn't Art just send me a nice thick manual on, as a PDF on how to do all this stuff on LinkedIn? I used to do that. I used to create a manual for LinkedIn, and once a month I would give a LinkedIn class. The reason I stopped doing that is LinkedIn changes quite a bit, quite frequently. There are training videos available within LinkedIn, and they're easily accessible. See if I can bring up the site here. My things are going over. That's not the one. I get behind here. No. I'll have Robin paste that into the chat box. I gave her the link for that. Oh, here it is. Here's the help menu for LinkedIn. All the things I'm talking about are on here. Once you know that this is available, something as simple as changing or adding an email address. That's a huge frustration. In the chat box, everyone, if you had this experience, have you had a LinkedIn account with a former employer that you've been locked out of? Well, an immediate yes. Nope, nope, nope. Okay, well, for those of you who said no, let me prevent that from happening to you again. There's nothing special about the email that you use to log in to LinkedIn. If you no longer have that email, yes, you will not be able to access that email account, but you'll still be able to log in. What you won't be able to do is recover your password by accessing that email. So it's really important to add a personal email account to your LinkedIn profile just for recovery, password recovery. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that, like Natalie had said, had to merge their accounts. That can be very difficult. It can be done very simply if you have all the information, but if you have a LinkedIn account floating out there that's incomplete and not up to date, it's representing you. And people have really struggled to close those accounts. There are ways, but it's not easy. And the close your account option is one of the things on the training that you could look at. So this is a really important link that I will give everybody in the follow-up material, but something to consider. Okay, so as far as privacy settings, it's under the Me icon, and you go to Settings and Privacy. There's a ton of stuff. Actually, it's overwhelming what you can change on here. You can change who sees your email address, who can see your connections. Viewers of this profile also viewed, who can see your last name. You can lock down your LinkedIn account from wide open all the way down to a point where nobody can see it. But here's what I would ask. If you don't want anyone to see your LinkedIn account, why do you have a LinkedIn account? It is for networking. It is for creating interest and learning about opportunities. You do not have to have a LinkedIn account. I would hate for someone to spend an enormous amount of time creating an awesome profile that they don't want anyone to see. Now, there are reasons that you want to lock down. I've worked with people who have protection orders and want to have a very minimal footprint online. I understand that. LinkedIn might not be the best option in that situation. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. But you need to decide where your efforts are going to be the most beneficial And if you decide LinkedIn is something you should try, great. If halfway through it or a month down the road you think it's just not for me, I would still give it a little bit more time. But at a certain point you might decide I don't want to do it. At that point what you're going to want to do is close your account. You don't want to leave an account open that you're no longer updating. Some of the things you can do is you can share job changes, education changes, kind of profile updates. When you are in a section of your LinkedIn creation, your profile creation, in which you're doing a lot of stuff, you might want to shut down your notifications a little bit. And the reason for that is if every single day you're adding your education and a new job and a new skill, if it's set up the right way, your entire network is getting those updates, which you might think is a good thing. The problem is it can be overwhelming, and your updates may kind of engulf someone's inbox or their updates page, and so or the feed, I guess it's called. So you can turn off updates for a period of time, and then when you've gotten to a point where you think your profile is pretty good, you turn them back on, and then the relevant updates, like I have a new career, I have a new accreditation, I just finished this course which gave me a new license. Those are updates you want people to see, but it's not a blow-by-blow, here's my resume being developed. So again, we could spend an entire 4 hours going through all the privacy settings, but that's one of the help menu items that I would spend some time taking a look at, because there's a lot there, kind of behind the scenes. One thing I do want to mention, though, is, if I can find it here. By the way, here's your active status. If you don't want people to see you're active on LinkedIn, you can shut it down to no one. There's just so many different options here. It would be overwhelming for me to go through. But one of the things that people try to do on LinkedIn is they try to limit who can see who they've clicked on, meaning that if I were to go to Robin's account and I searched for Robin and I clicked on her, she's going to get a little notification that said, Art Larson from Duluth viewed your profile. That's very important to understand, and the reason that's important is if I've never met Robin before, I'd hate for that to be my introduction, okay? Think about Facebook. Have you ever looked at someone on Facebook, maybe an old classmate that you didn't get along with, but you just wanted to see what they were up to? How horrifying would it be for them to say, hey, Art Larson just stalked your account? That's not why we do it on LinkedIn. Generally, it's to find more information about them, and if you're prepping for an interview, that could be perfectly okay. However, be aware that every profile you click on, unless you make specific reasons or specific settings for them not to see it, it shows that you clicked on them. So let's go back to talk about one of the most simple things we can do on LinkedIn, but in many cases is not done very well, and that is your profile picture. Everyone's got a camera phone now. We all have access to pictures anytime, anywhere. Many people are very good at taking selfies. Profile picture is, in effect, it is a bit of a selfie, but think of it as a professional selfie. So give me some examples. Adding a profile picture makes your profile 14 times more likely to be viewed by others. It's the employer's expectation that anyone who's promoting their LinkedIn account has a complete LinkedIn account. And in order to have a complete LinkedIn account, you have to have a picture. Now, one of the questions I get quite often is, well, they're going to see how old I am. And yes, they may get an indication of how experienced you are. Not the issue, but the counterpoint I would have to that is anyone clicking on your LinkedIn profile is already interested. You've already shown them something. I don't click on every LinkedIn profile and every resume I see. I only do it to the people I'm about to interview. And yes, they may see that I have some gray hair. It's a small picture. It's not anything that I worry about too much. If you're not comfortable with that, consider whether LinkedIn is for you or not. I've never run into an issue of, at this stage of the game, at the point they're in LinkedIn trying to find more information about you, that becomes an issue. But it is a concern, and I get it. It's a valid concern. People are more likely to be able to recognize you. You come into an interview, they already know what to expect. Here's some examples of pictures that have gone wrong. One, this. There are settings in which you can put up, I don't want anyone outside my network to see my picture. Well, anyone outside your network is unlikely to connect with you if you don't have a picture, because that looks like an incomplete account, and it was just a setting. So be aware of that. This right here, well, I'll go through these one by one. You do need a photo. Poor quality photos are really inexcusable at this point, simply because the camera phones take amazing pictures. My son is doing some hiking right now, and he just sent me a picture from the top of a mountain in Colorado about 2 hours ago. And it looked like it was a professional shot from 20 years ago. I mean, it looked like he had a lighting studio up there, and it was just from a camera phone. It's amazing the quality that's out there. Make sure that you're taking the time to put in good lighting, making sure the sun isn't behind you. We don't need a full body shot. It's about like this, although there's a problem with this one too. Make sure that you're taking a little bit of time. And a selfie in a car, I do see people doing that. I wouldn't recommend that on a LinkedIn account. Take a little extra time. You don't have to pay for a professional headshot. I wouldn't recommend about using a logo. I do see that occasionally, although it's more and more seldom that people put a logo on there. Make sure that you smile. Who wants to work with a grumpy person? I don't. Everyone has, by the way. And remember, when I'm looking at you before I meet you, a picture can have a lot more impact than it should, because this is all I know about you. I know about your skills, and then this is what I base my perception on, whether you're a happy person or not. Can't have an off day on that LinkedIn profile picture. And then I do see these occasionally where there's group shots, or a married couple shot, or animals. Or I do see some people carry over their Facebook, you know, I got a trophy fish here that I caught in Alaska, and they're holding it up, and they use that picture for their LinkedIn account. All of those are ways that you can separate yourself from other people on LinkedIn by taking a little extra time. To take a somewhat neutral background, dressing to the profession you are in, much like an interview. Think about, what would I wear to an interview for the type of jobs I'm going for? And usually that's what I recommend people wear for a LinkedIn photo. Great photos, great results, 21 times more clicks, 36 times more messages from people, and 9 times more connection requests. Facial recognition, I'm not talking about the computerized part. When I look at LinkedIn on, you may know type situations where it kind of auto puts up connections, I'm not reading the names, I'm looking at the pictures first. And if I see someone I recognize, I'm much more likely to try to connect with that person. All right, let's talk about summaries. This is the about. A lot of LinkedIn is very similar to your resume. You list your work history. I'm not going to go through that step by step, but this is a little different, this summary. You want to focus on your accomplishments relevant to the industry you're marketing yourself to, not necessarily to the specific needs of the company you just most recently applied to, but think about industry specific. What have you done that's worth telling people about? So you don't want to say, I'm a job seeker. I don't need to know that. That's not important. I don't need to know what your needs are. I need to know how you can fill my needs. That's what job search is all about, fulfilling a need. So I'm going to bring up my profile, and I used a summary from my past job, my job just before this one, when I was a workforce development representative. And I trained people. I trained people in a variety of job search topics. So my summary, my about, was, with nearly 2 decades of experience in seminar delivery and curriculum development in the fields of technology and job search skills, I've witnessed the growth of many of the platforms and strategies currently in use. From the infancy of social media to current resume formats, I have actively followed trends and am constantly updating my skills to best serve both job seekers and employers in northeastern Minnesota. Now, other than both of those being a run-on sentence, the idea here is it gives a snapshot of what they're going to see should they go down the list. What's different between this and a resume is, in a resume, I have a shorter attention span. I usually don't go in narrative text format, meaning that it's a couple of paragraphs. You need to have over 40 words. So this is not just a job title, it's a summary. and you have a little bit more time to work with employers on your LinkedIn account because, like I said, you have more of a captive audience. If you don't work towards completing your profile to 100%, you really lose out on employers who value LinkedIn. Now, not every employer is going on LinkedIn to see you. Like I said, you don't have to have a LinkedIn account. And there are some employers who absolutely do not engage with LinkedIn. But for those who do, they are generally only considering candidates who have a completed profile, because that means that they have finished, they have followed through, they are marketing themselves. They can't expect you to market their business any better than you market yourself. So what does it say to a business that, hey, I want to work for you, but I don't even complete my own stuff? Now, at some point, all of us are in that boat. We're at the beginning. I was. Every one of you were. When you're just starting out, it's really important to have a high level of activity. You know, getting connections, at least one a week. Some people connect with everybody in the space of a couple days. I had a colleague who connected with 500 people in 1 week. I've been on the site for, I think, 10, 15 years. I'm at 257. The reason I do that, and again, this is opinion, this is what I use LinkedIn for, is I only connect with people I know that I've met in the real world. I do not accept connection requests from someone just interested in connecting. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. You can certainly do that. But here's why I think that's important. Okay, so I'm going to go to my LinkedIn account, and I'll talk to you about the main reason and how I use it for networking. In your job search, it's important to have employers that you're interested in, not job postings you find, but employers you're interested in working in. And I call this the proactive part of job search. I'm not waiting for jobs to happen. I'm actively seeking out employers that maybe I could, you know, be successful with. So I follow those employers. So one of the employers I follow in this area is Saturn Systems. Good company. I've heard a lot of great things about. They're not currently hiring, but that's okay, because I'm making the connection. I'm researching their needs so that when a job does happen, I'm not going to wait around for it, but when it does happen, I've already kind of laid the groundwork. Maybe I've networked within their company. I've found who works there. I can do that very simply and find out, hey, here's someone I'd like to meet. Here's the people I have in common with that person. So an example would be, in this person, I know 24 people in common. And by clicking on that, I could get a warm introduction. That's why I don't do cold calls. That's a high-level job-seeking strategy, doing cold calls. I'm not comfortable doing it. It's outside my comfort zone. Not that I should attempt it, but I'm much easier. I work much better with warm introductions. LinkedIn is very good at creating warm introductions. So I look at the 23 people that we have shared in common, and I look for the person most likely to be a good connection, and I call that person. I get on the phone. I don't try to message that person and create an awkward three-way LinkedIn messaging situation. I've done that, by the way. It doesn't work very well. I call that person and say, hey, I see you know so-and-so at Saturn Systems. Really interested in that company. I was hoping you could make a warm introduction so I could ask them some questions. Now, that is scary. That's not easy to do. But the more uncomfortable you make yourself in job search, generally the shorter your job search is. Be willing to hear no. The more you hear no, the better your job searching in a lot of cases. Avoid the job board addiction, as Ben said, and think of new strategies. And LinkedIn is certainly a strategy. So going back to their homepage here, if I scroll down and I take notes and I try to figure out what they're looking at, there's 4 jobs they have posted that I could apply for right now. These jobs will start finding me because I'm following them. But also, they'll start posting things that are relevant to their company. So I go down here and I see that they posted something about Python programming. Well, they're a software company. They're posting about Python. Here's a cool thing you can take away. If you take nothing else out of today's, and I hope you take some other things out of this presentation, has anyone heard of Coursera? Just in the chat box, have you heard of Coursera, or have you actually applied or created an account with Coursera? Yes, signed up recently. Yes, yes. Not heard of it. Good. Then I'm here to give you something immediately, and I'll include this in the notes I send everybody. There is a really cool offer through CareerForce where you can create a free Coursera account until September 30th. I'm not selling you anything. This is absolutely free, with access over to 3,800 courses. One of those courses that I just signed up for, you guessed it, Python programming. While you're unemployed, employers are wondering what you've been doing. You could say, I've been actively seeking work and I've gotten a few interviews, or you could say, yes, during the downtime in which I've been unemployed, I've been enhancing my skills in computer programming. I just finished a University of Michigan online course in Python programming. That's a much better introduction to a company who values that skill than I haven't worked since February. Everyone's in the same situation. I haven't been working for a period of time. When you can tell an employer what you've been doing in that time, it really helps to enhance your chances. And it's something new to talk about on LinkedIn while you're unemployed. It's a great networking opportunity. So to complete your profile to 100%, as we're coming up to kind of the time here, add links to show off your work, your presentation. Keep it professional, but you can think of this as something you can use to prove what you can do rather than just say what you can do. Add skills. Hopefully, you're considering looking for recommendations. Okay? A lot of people will ask for a piece of paper, a letter of recommendation. On LinkedIn, you can ask for professional recommendations. And what does that look like? I'll show you real quick here. I'm going to go to my profile. You can ask these. Sometimes they're automatically generated or they're done for you. But a recommendation from a trusted coworker or vendor or client says a lot more than someone liking a skill. You can list a bunch of skills and people can like them on LinkedIn. If someone takes the time and effort to write you a recommendation based on that aptitude, it is much more impactful. So consider reaching out to someone to ask for a professional recommendation. The help menu that I'm going to send you, the help link will show you exactly how to integrate that into your LinkedIn account. Please remove any outdated information from your experience section and follow companies that offer your dream jobs. Follow at least 5 companies. You don't have to follow everybody under the sun, but rather than waiting for opportunities to present themselves, consider that you can start to create opportunities by developing relationships with companies that could use your skill sets, your experience, where you'd be happy, basically. I went right up to 4 o'clock. Thank you very much for sticking with us right till the end. Next week, we will be talking about the job interview. We're going to have a great interplay of 2 presenters doing a simulated mock interview to show you what works, what you can maybe try in your next mock interview. We'll talk about star stories and how to create them. It's going to be a great presentation. I will send a link to register for that in the follow-up material tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I hope you got something out of this presentation. I will be sending you a video recording of it in the follow-up material, along with a link to a virtual and interactive services webpage where you can find a catalog of all the previous recordings. Thank you, everyone, and I wish you the best of luck in your job search.